Okay, so because the mandate here, what we have, if you said, so this is the work what you can see that we have been doing with our advanced research institutes. As I mentioned earlier, that we work with advanced research institutes, and also we work with our national partners. So basically, these resources are very much required for deployment. So we worked with advanced research institutes and NAS partners to develop those resources. Now, what we worked basically to develop those intermediate resources, different cost-effective genotyping assays, so that the breeding and genetics community can use in groundnut. How, what kind of assays? So basically, in 10 years, we have started. Actually, I have not mentioned that one. That is page. When I came here, we were genotyping on page, and really, it was very uh, like tedious, laborious, and then really very tedious to do. That you cannot run more than 3, 4 gels in a day, and really, it was very tiring. We have shifted now from SSRs and DART we used when we did not have genomes, but we are not using right now. CASP says yes, whenever we develop some marker says, CASP is the one that we have been highly utilizing. GBS, I will say again, basically when we don't, did not had this 58K SNPs, the one in yellow you are seeing, the array, we were using GBS, otherwise GBS has some serious problems and missing and other things. So basically, I'm not big fan of GBS in that way. 50K SNPs, those are the good ones. They are working well for mapping purposes and other things. So WGRS, yes. So it's again, if you have money, you are rich, you have a lot of money in your pocket, you can go for WGRS and then you can generate data in mapping. Then 10K is 10 SNPs panel, I will be showing that one. So basically, here we are saying we have two kinds of uh, uses. One, we need large number of markers, and then we will be genotyping on say 100, 200, 300, 400 breeding material or genetic populations for mapping. The other use is like that we have a small set of markers, say 10, 20, and then we will be in screening them in thousands of lines. Those will be trait linked markers or QC or something like that. That will be used large set. So one, we have less number of SNPs, large number of samples. One, we have large number of SNPs and a small number of samples. So that is how we need to customize these assays, and that is why we are now developing one intermediate assay, that is mid density assay with 5000, and now we are trying to clubbing the application for both the things, like basically I will be showing in those slides. So this is the, like basically you can say, journey from SSR to SNPs. Now we are 95% using SNP data in our breeding program currently, and it's very cost effective how we have made it. I will take you to those slides. So if you see like high density genotyping, as I mentioned, 58K SNP chips that we developed, it's really very useful. There are 58,000 SNPs on that. And if you genotype for genetic diversity, trait mapping, genomic selection, marker based varietal adoption, these are good. This is working good. We have tested it. GBS, again, if you don't have any option, I will say you can go for GBS. I'm not big fan of it. Or you can increase the basically sequencing depth so that you can have more data. And whole genome sequencing, yes, in some cases we are using whole genome sequencing. I will tell you, uh, for large population, large number of samples, it's not so easy. It's very costly. So like that way. Okay, coming mid density that I was talking about, that's really very important. This is new, I think, in only selected crops, maybe one or two crops it is available. So basically in next 3, 4 years, I think many crops may be having such assays. What we are doing, basically we are keeping 5000 SNPs, and also including here 160 trait associated SNPs. What that mean? That we will use it for genomic selection purpose. So suppose if you are doing genomic selection, what you can do, you can select some 10, 20 line based on genomic selection, and if you have trait linked marker, then you can imply those selection criteria, and then you can select those trait as well in that one. And it's very cheap, basically less than $10 per sample, and definitely then you can use it for various purposes. The high density, I said, it's mostly available about $60 per sample or so. So those are the costly one. This is just $10, less than $10, and it is going to be more cheaper, because when competition comes between different service providers, definitely the consumers are the beneficiaries. So okay, here we are seeing that option. Okay, if you want to use foreground selection and background selection in your marker sheet background breeding program, of course you can use it. So this is not that much costly. Genetic purity, actually this is a big concern. It is a big concern in many of the breeding programs, although because those seeds are handled by technicians in field, laborers, and then packaging. So basically that seed goes from hands to hand during the processing in a single breeding program. So that means error can happen at any point of time. The breeder needs to maintain genetic purity in their breeding program, the parents they are using. Otherwise, there will be problem basically in the further generation. So unmarker based varietal adoption, yes, we are looking for it, that we want to assess the actual varietal adoption, not that based on some record somebody has recorded. Basically, it's based on the marker real time check that how much this variety is being adopted in a particular region. This is low density. So basically like F1, as I mentioned that in breeding program, F1s needs to be checked in many of the crops. If you can see it, I will just leave it on the breeders. If they are convinced, they are 100% sure, they can go for it. But what we are encouraging that QC should be used. F1 definitely should be confirmed. Otherwise, your breeding and genetic population will be biased. So what we have done basically, we have developed a QC panel that is with only 20 SNPs, and we have included here from ECRISAT Asia, ECRISAT WCA, ECRISAT ESA, and also in India ICR DGR. That means we have genotyped all the founder parents, means the parents these institutes are using in the breeding program. And these 20 SNPs can differentiate any of these cross combinations. So in these 20 SNPs, so what we are doing at ECRISAT, how to use it? As I mentioned that for 10 SNPs at Intertek, you can get data in 100 rupees. That means $1.5 you can get for 10 SNP data for a single sample. And that is to without DNA isolation. That's really cheap. So if you define that, okay, you are going to use next 2 years, these 20 parents, 50 parents, then from these 20, you can pick those polymorphic SNPs, and then you make a set of 10 SNPs. Even the breeder is even more like basically taking interest, even like we are doing at ECRISAT. Even here, right, for this I'm telling about this post-rainy season, our breeder is making crosses using some 15 parents. So basically 7 SNPs only, out of that 7, at least minimum 4 SNPs are differentiating those combinations. So 3 SNPs are remaining. In that one, you can have trait associated SNPs in that. What I mean to say that you can use it in different ways. 10 SNPs, cost remains same. For 10 SNPs per sample, you are going to pay only 100 rupees without DNA isolation. Why this without DNA isolation? Because we are working in ECRISAT, and as I mentioned, we have our locations, breeding locations in Africa, and even in India. If you see the breeding centers in remote areas, if you see, they don't have a DNA isolation facility. And so that means if you remove this hurdle of DNA isolation, you just chip the sample, like punch it, and then send directly from field to the Intertek company, and they will be genotyping it. So it's very simple. No, you don't need any lab. That's what I mean to say. Earlier I was saying that for sequencing, everyone should not have lab. Now I will say even for DNA isolation, everyone should not have lab. And you can use this facility for genotyping. So that is really promising, and it is helping really very well for our African breeding centers. And also we have seen adoption in India as well. Now coming to the like gene discovery and diagnostic markers. Of course, if you want to use marker state selection, marker state backcross breeding, definitely you need linked markers. And also, even if you want to deploy genome editing kind of approaches also, you need to have access to the genes whose function is known that you are going to edit for crop improvement. So basically you need gene discovery, and really sequencing has helped a lot, and the analysis. If you see, I have just listed some papers also here. Interested people can see, they can read it. So you have now different options of mapping. Now you need to see what resources you have, what kind of genetic populations you have, and then how much money you have, how much you can afford, and then basically you can choose the genotyping platform, sequencing options, and then you can go for trait marking, right? I will be presenting here how we are using Attic Research, especially in groundnut, that we are getting done in very less time and then more precisely. We have here different kind of genetic populations. Earlier you might have seen biparental, that was normal. Now we have actually three magic populations. That is really very diverse material. One for aflatoxin, one for drought tolerance, and one for disease and nutrition. Similarly, we have nested association mapping populations. So we have here like Spanish and Valencia, two different kind of groups. So basically we have made separately these NUM populations for mapping. Magic and NOM population actually not just they serve for mapping, they are diverse breeding material. So really for breeding also it's a good, you can select very good material out of it. Association mapping, it's everyone knowing is it's a normal, basically, although concept is coming from animal sciences where you can't have such kind of biparent and other populations, so association mapping is only the option. And in plants also it is serving very good method, especially in those plant species those are perennial or something like that. So really that's very useful, this approach. Okay, if you see groundnut which traits we are interested, so you can see some of the traits that we are targeting. That is basically we have based on Africa and India locations, Asia, these locations we have started working. So these, I am not listing here this breeding that we are doing breeding for this. I am just talking about trait mapping and then making available diagnostic markers for these traits. Okay, now let's come to the sequencing based approaches. So one approach is you can see trait mapping through sequencing of complete population. Suppose if you have recombinant inbuilt line, you can generate genotyping by sequencing data, or if you have money, you can go for whole genome resequencing. That means WGRS data, you can go 5x, or it's up to you money, right? But even like how much it is required, you can see based on the genome size, you can estimate it. The second approach, you might have heard of bulk segregant analysis from here in I think 90s, and then where you pool samples basically, so like resistant and susceptible pools. So QTL-seq means suppose if you have real population for disease resistance, you can pool DNA from 20 highly resistant and from one that is one pool, and another pool susceptible you can make by pooling highly susceptible 20 genotypes. That means you have a sample susceptible bulk, you have resistant bulk, and then also you can sequence two parents. So you have four samples for QTLC. If it is not a normal genotype, it is one parent is mutant, then you can say mute map. So it's just basically sorry, it's a basically a terminology SecBSA. If you don't get basically much from peak, basically you can't get, then you can go genome wide, BSR-seq, also like from based on RNA. Indel-seq, not only SNPs, if you go for indels. So basically it's a terminology. What I mean to say, once you have such kind of population, now these are the approaches you can complete. If you have everything ready, phenotyping data on the population samples, you can sequence and perform analysis. Within 6 months, you can get results on genes and markers. So that is the like advantage. We have used some of these approaches very heavily. I will show one by one. Here we have used with our national partner DGR, that is for eastern blot resistance, identifying genomic region and candidate genes. I will not go in detail basically, but I will be showing those examples. And here we have used genotyping by sequencing. You can see this paper here. We have gone for disease resistance and we have used whole genome resequencing, basically WGRS. Yes, of course, you can have basically very good mapping, very good. You can go to the genomic regions, you can get genes, then you can develop caspases. Really, it's very helpful. But of course, it is costly. Now, this is the example. Now, shifting to pooled based sequencing that I was mentioning, that is QTL-seq. You can see here that it is for rust and late leafy spot. So really we could develop markers from these, whether it's a lab, really specific simple markers that you can run in lab, or CASP assay that I will show later that we are using at the Intertek platform. I was mentioning $1.5 cost, so we are using that one. So this is like basically here rust and late leaf spot. But we had data, we were struggling to find genes and really reliable markers. We completed this task in 6 months after sequencing. Here is another examples that we have done with Chinese colleagues. And here the trait you can see is selling percentage. And the another side you can see bacterial wilt, that is a disease. You can see how disastrous that disease is, and that is in China. Here we used basically a modified approach, both the parents in the analysis one by one. And original QTL-seq approach, if you see, that is based on only using single parent. So here we used basically two parents one by one to see that what kind of results we are getting and differences. So we end up developing markers for both of these traits. We have recently finished for fresh seed dormancy. So in groundnut, actually this is a serious problem, especially in Spanish, the one we grow in India and Africa. Suppose during harvesting, if it is delayed for 1 week and it is rain, I think 70-80% of your pods or seeds you see germinated inside the soil. Really a huge loss. And really it is very, and whatever remaining pods will be there, their quality will not be good. That means you are losing a lot. So we could develop marker for this one. So QTL-seq approach really very useful. You can see third one. Currently we are doing multiple for multiple traits, and in future they will be coming up. I will not go in detail, but I will touch here one of the most complicated trait, that is aflatoxin contamination. You might have heard that apart from maize, groundnut is one of the crop that is having, there is a standard set in US and Europe for export from India, and it is good, not good for health. I will not go detail in all those things. What we are trying to do it, that we are trying to understand these three kinds of resistance mechanism. In vitro seed colonization means if the pathogen comes in contact to the seed in post harvest, then it resists from the infection. Second is pre-harvest contamination, that is field resistance. That means in the field, if pathogen comes to the contact of pods and seeds, then it resists. The third one is aflatoxin production. There are also some genotypes, even the infection happens, they resist producing toxin. So that means what we are doing, these resistance mechanism are present in different genotypes. What we are trying to do with different approaches, these Jivas and then magic, by crossing these things, we are trying to bring all these three resistance mechanism into one. That means first, it should not allow to get infected in field. If it gets some infection, it should resist during post harvest. And also if it increases, then it should resist toxin production. So that is our approach. Let's see how much we will be successful in coming years. So this is just in short. I will not go in detail because this is a very big story in that. I would like also to touch about peanut allergy. I think US and Europe, you might have heard, even in Australia, that's a huge population. And when last 2-3 years, we wanted to see that what kind of, what level of actually allergens, proteins we have in our groundnut accessions, varieties that we eat. Although our Asian and African populations, those are not much affected from these allergies, but you will hear, especially from US and Europe, that allergy is a problem. Even the Indian population, if they have uh, spent their life, basically the childhood in US and Europe, they are likely to be susceptible basically for these things. So you might have seen different papers. I will not go in detail, but what it says that if you introduce minimum level of peanuts during the childhood different stages, so that kind of tolerance level will be developed, and there is some level to it. You can develop, means you can say 100 mg, you can develop tolerance up to 100 mg. If that is the case, and I think US and other government agencies, they are working on it, developing. And if suppose you can't do with the current generation, right, but the coming generation, you can develop, try to develop tolerance, some kind of tolerance. If you are able to develop tolerance, then also they should not, the kids should not be exposed to the peanuts with high allergen level. What I mean to say here, most of the times you see sudden introduction, sudden consumption of peanut, even little bit, it triggers. So if you have peanuts very with very less allergen content, then definitely it will be better. Although it is not the solution. What we have done basically, most of the protocols we have seen earlier, those were from products, like you collect products from the market, peanut products or any food products, and then you quantify the content of those allergens. What we have done basically, we developed allergen monoclonal antibody based ELISA protocol for from the seed, groundnut seed. So basically, we can see whether which variety is having what kind of allergen content. So we saw in our 300 germplasm from ICRISAT, that was global diversity collection. And if you can see, just I have put two graphs here. Left side, if you can see allergen H1, RIH1, you can see, and those values are, these are in microgram per gram. So you can see like very low level of also present. Although there is a variation between seasons, but not so much. There is some consistency. The low remains low as comparison. So if suppose if you see the right side, you see it goes to many thousands. What I mean to say, and we have also done, these are some of the varieties. I have not put that slide here. Most of the varieties currently we consume, they are having about 20,000, 10,000 of microgram per gram. What I mean to say here, we can avoid, suppose if you want to, industry has to flourish, they have market in different places in US, Europe, then they can avoid such kind of products. We have completed this last year, and then we got some of the genotypes. We have done at our place. Now we are trying to get it done verification with independent labs something, and then some of the companies, they are approaching actually not as a basically for product in the market, but they want to use them in developing the tolerance to expose while they are exposing. So they want, if such peanuts are available. So that kind of discussion we are going on, but really it's a very complex problem. Okay, now you have genomic resources, markers, but again, nothing is useful for the farmers. It's all science we are doing and making information available for the public domain, but ultimately matters what we are giving to the society. Now, so this is the third phase. As I mentioned that I say that we work with advanced research institutes and the national partners. So this is the component actually, genomics enabled breeding, that we do with national partners, because they are basically our stakeholders. They take our product to the farmers and markets. How? Let's go through it. So let me mention first here markers. You must have seen that somebody has reported identified associated markers. Actually, you see hundreds of thousands of paper you see reporting associated markers. But are those being used in breeding program? No, hardly. Why? Because there is no validation mechanism, no verification. They have not validated how effective those markers are there. That is why you see you will end up very less number of diagnostic markers that are being used in breeding program. Otherwise, there are many reports on that. So I would suggest the young ones, basically the researchers who are working in this area, don't leave your research of just publishing paper reporting some associated markers and genes. Make sure you follow up your research until unless your information is not being utilized by the research community, by the farmers, that goes research to the farmers. Don't leave on the others that, okay, this is not my job, others will do. I'm not sure others will take 10 times, but you can 10 years, but you can do in just 4-5 years because you know your research. So this is what we have been following, and I will show that impact as well. This is a STPG project that is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that is, I was talking about that in $1.5, you can get genotyping data for 10 SNPs. And that is how you can see many crops here included. Anybody can approach, anyone can use. It's open for everyone. And you can just ask those colleagues that, okay, in my crop, for which traits markers are available, and then accordingly you can plan and use it. How we are using in groundnut, this is the example what we have rust, late leaf spot, and oleic acid. We have put as a 10 SNP panel, and we can get data for all these 10 SNPs in just 100 rupees per sample. And that's very precise because you can get results in F2 stage, very early stage itself. We have developed this in 2018 or so, and even we have not published this paper, but you can see till now we have used 200,000 data points of this assay from Intertek. Not only us as ICRISAT, from other parts of the world they are using this one. So as I mentioned, whether we publish or don't publish, it's open and every time like basically accessible to everyone. That is the beauty basically we have at the institute. That's a really wonderful experience that you don't have any limitations to share, and it's you really become very happy if it is useful for someone. And we are trying to now improve it further by adding some more traits I was mentioning in my previous slides.